Go. As I say, welcome to our committee member orientation webinar. We are recording, just to let you know, so that anyone who was not able to be with us tonight will be able to view this at another time. And I'm going to be going through a PowerPoint with you all. So I will start sharing my screen in just a minute, but just to let you know, we will send out the PowerPoint afterwards, so you don't have to feel that it's necessary to take a bunch of notes. Of course, I'm thrilled to think that you might take a bunch of notes, but just to let you know, you don't have to. So I'm going to start sharing my screen now. And hopefully you are seeing the slideshow. So this is, we do update the committee orientation every year. We're going to be talking, starting out, talking a little bit about the Michigan Dental Association and how it's organized. You know, we started doing these committee orientations in an effort to give everybody the same basic information about how the organization is structured, the role of the committees within governance, et cetera, because it became apparent that while some people knew their committees very, very well, they didn't always know how it fit into what the MDA was trying to accomplish here for our members. So that's the purpose of getting together today. The committee is organized, the MDA is organized in its governance system to be, the component relations part of it is the House of Delegates. It's our overarching body, and as you may be familiar, the House of Delegates has 102 members divided up among 12 regions of the state. There are 26 component dental societies, and the House of Delegates are responsible for approving advisory resolutions, reviewing and making any changes to the bylaws, and they also elect our Board of Trustees and the ADA delegation. A critical role is played by the nominating committee, where there is one member per region, and the chair of the nominating committee is always the past president, the immediate past president. Three other committees from the MDA House of Delegates are the Bylaws Language Review Committee, the Reference Committee, and the Committee on Credentials, Rules, and Order. Those are all the House committees. I apologize, I'm having a hard time getting it to proceed. Okay, MDA structure. Then the Board of Trustees, of course, are the ongoing managing body. It's made up of 6 officers that you can see here on the screen. There are 9 trustees, all of whom serve at large. I am an ex officio member of the Board of Trustees and do not have a vote, but I serve. And the Board of Trustees has 16 standing committees. Those are the committees that you are probably here representing, as well as 5 board committees. The Board of Trustees is responsible for setting MDA policy, approving the budget, and setting the amount of the dues every year. They also employ me as the CEO Executive Director, and I oversee the staff. My role as Executive Director, as I mentioned, I'm a non-voting member of the Board and Executive Committee, Secretary to IFG, and I serve as a consultant to the Foundation and the PAC. I'm also an ex officio member of all the committees, so you will probably see me at various meetings throughout the course of the year. I oversee the staff and supervise the development of the annual budget, and I'm trying to do my best to ensure that the MDA takes appropriate steps regarding risk management. I also represent the MDA in all our business dealings. I serve as a liaison from an advocacy perspective and promote positive PR. So you can see when it comes to addressing policy, I also help develop the materials that go to the board for policy development and oversee the implementation of any policy that they approve. So it's important that the board has adequate information to help it make sound decisions. So I work with the board to make sure we meet the needs of our members and oversee the strategic planning process. So let's talk a little bit about the strategic plan. This MDA strategic plan 2016-2020 is about to come to an end. And I don't have to tell you that our plan, as much as it has been very much on course, got quite a bit upended by the pandemic. A lot of the goals and objectives remain the same, but the way we fulfilled it became a little different this year as a result of COVID-19. So we have 4 goals in our current strategic plan. The first one is to develop exceptional member value with an objective of maintaining or increasing the percentage of members who give us top scores in our member value ratings. And one thing that I'm really proud of is that last year when we did our regular survey of our members, we found that when we were doing a new metric, the Net Promoter Score, that we were really hitting it out of the park. The typical association has a Net Promoter Score of 21, and the Michigan Dental Association earned a score, an average score from all its members of 49, which is outstanding. So I felt really great about that. And the way we were going about this had 3 strategies. One related to continuing education, one related to helping them succeed by providing practice management resources, and then the third one is to enhance the positioning of the profession and the MDA membership with legislators and the public. So you can see for many of you with your committees, what you do in your committee specifically relates to a strategic plan goal and a strategic plan strategy. Another membership goal, our second one, is to increase member participation. And we're doing that primarily through measuring and moving towards a positive annual member retention rate of 96% or more, and maintaining the number of full dues paying members while maintaining an active market share of 75% or greater. So you can see this year we've had a little bit of a challenge related to the retention rate because of the pandemic. We had quite a few people when they stopped practicing. The result was we also stopped aggressively going after people who had not yet paid their dues because everyone was in a very uncertain financial position. At this point in time, things are going quite well. Our retention rate is not quite what it had been, but we've really picked up a lot of the people who were a little delinquent in paying their dues. So that's great to see. We also are focusing on underrepresented segments and looking at people who went to dental school outside of Michigan as a key target market. In addition, of course, there are 4 large components that have the largest number of non-members, and we focus a great deal of attention there as well. Our finance goal is organized towards assuring organizational sustainability. Our annual budget is not necessarily supposed to be a surplus budget, although it typically is. Very rare that we would pass a deficit budget. But it's also important that our annual budget supports our strategic plan. So you can see that we have 3 main strategies for that. One is we tend to want to do periodic small increases in dues, continuing to focus on non-dues revenue, and then our positive investment returns. Finally is our organizational goal. We want to make sure that MDA's capacity is sufficient to meet the needs of all our members. So 2 ways of going about that. One is to ensure that mechanisms are in place to support our components. And the second one is we're enhancing our internal processes to support strategic focus and effective implementation of our programs, benefits, and services. So that's it on the current strategic plan. Now you saw 2020 is the year that we come to the end of that plan, and every 4 years we undertake a more thorough strategic planning process. So committee chairs were included in the pre-planning survey that we did this year. I will say that we're right in the middle of the process, and it appears that the priorities are going to be similar to what we have in our current plan. We actually have a short strategic planning meeting by Zoom tomorrow, and then there will be a strategic planning retreat via Zoom on October 9th. So we expect our board to review, finalize, and approve the new plan at the December Board of Trustees meeting so that when January 1st comes, we are all set and all fresh with our strategic plan 2021 through 2025. So now let's talk a little bit about legal issues as they relate to committee members. Committee members are a fiduciary to the Michigan Dental Association, and fiduciary comes from the word that means trust in Latin. In other words, a person who has the power and obligation to act for another under circumstances that require total trust, good faith, and honesty. So you can see how that fits really all volunteers at the Michigan Dental Association. As a committee member, you have a fiduciary responsibility to the MDA. And you might say, what is that? What are those fiduciary responsibilities? And there are three basic responsibilities. The first is the duty of care. So that duty of care can be summarized by doing things like the duty to participate actively in your committee meetings, a duty to act in the best interests of the Michigan Dental Association, and of course a duty to act in a fiscally responsible manner. Those three things are all part of duty of care. So, you know, when we look at things that we have to address, you know, some questions that might come up have to do with the relationship between the committee and the board. And I want you to know here with question one, how does the board treat information provided by committees? The board knows that you as a committee member have brought your best efforts to your work, right? They take seriously all the information that you are providing to them in your advisory capacity. And they do take very seriously all recommendations that are made by committees to the Board of Trustees. So you can feel confident that the work you are doing is important to the board. And I've also often had people say, oh, I'm really not that great with numbers. You know, do I have to study up in order to be a good fiduciary when it comes to financial issues? And of course, the answer is no. You need to be diligent as a reasonably prudent person would be, and don't ignore the information, do your best, but it's not important for you to be an expert. It is important for you to ask questions. If there's something of a financial issue coming up before your committee, ask the questions that you would ordinarily ask to make sure that you understand what you need to understand in order to make a good decision. The second duty is the duty of loyalty. And this is an area that I think most people really understand very internally. You know, you have a duty to be loyal to the Michigan Dental Association. In other words, to avoid a conflict of interest. If you do think you may have one, you need to identify those conflicts of interest, and then you have a duty to disclose them. You may think, well, that's not really a conflict, because I can keep it separate in my head, or we both agree, that kind of thing. It's always better to disclose any potential conflict of interest, even if it's no big deal. And then, of course, the final duty is the duty of maintaining confidentiality. And I know you can see that, you know, the actual discussions that the committee has, who said what, that kind of thing. Or perhaps you have information that is embargoed, such as details associated with a meeting or some kind of a endorsement, for example. So it's important to be aware of maintaining confidentiality when you're supposed to. Common question is, you know, well, why do people not reveal or recognize a possible conflict of interest? One reason maybe is because it's not financial in nature. Most people think of conflict of interest as being receiving money for something, but actually divided loyalty, where you have a loyalty to another organization, say your specialty society or your component even could be someone that has a special interest. When you have divided loyalty, it does not necessarily mean money. And then we talk about duty of confidentiality. I'm going to talk a little bit later on about executive session. We can discuss that later. Finally is the duty of obedience. That is the duty not to do what you're told, but to act in accordance with the governing documents for that Michigan Dental Association, including its constitution and bylaws, our mission, vision, and core values. It's important that when a committee makes a decision, it's important for you to support the decisions that your committee has made and not to undermine them. Occasionally, we will have people say, well, some time has passed or we have new information. Would it be okay to reconsider a decision that we made a meeting or two ago or even last year? And that's actually a good time to suggest reconsideration of a committee decision. Any policy or any recommendation is not set in stone, but can be changed. And a good time to do that is when you have new information or there has been a significant amount of time elapsed since that decision was made, so that there was turnover on the committee, et cetera. Attorney-client privilege is a legal issue that I wanted to bring up to you. It's not something that comes up in committees often, but it can, and it may be the Committee on Governmental and Insurance Affairs, for example, may seek advice from an attorney around a proposed policy or legal action or legislation. Or I could see the Committee on Annual Session, for example, exploring new options for business models and seeking information about contracts or something like that. So anytime a group is seeking advice from an attorney, they may go into what is called attorney-client privilege sessions. The good thing about an attorney-client session is that disclosure cannot be compelled in a lawsuit, for example, but in order to make sure that that material does remain confidential, you cannot talk about it outside the people who had been allowed to know about it. So, you know, when it comes to who can you talk to about an attorney-client session, for a committee member, it would be other members of the committee, your staff person, the attorney, and also members of the Board of Trustees if that has been reported to them. So that would be the members of the control group only. Another thing that committee members need to know about is antitrust. At this point in time, I personally think that almost every volunteer I've ever met is very familiar with antitrust. But there was a time when you would go to a committee meeting or a component meeting and you would hear, you know, well, let's get together and all do this one thing, whether it has to do with an insurance company or a dental supply company or something like that. Antitrust is an issue anytime two or more independent dentists or entities engage in some kind of joint activity that restrains competition. The thing that's interesting about antitrust is that there's so many different ways to enforce antitrust. The Justice Department can bring an action against an organization or against individuals. The Federal Trade Commission may also, or there can be suits brought by private parties. And I think the one thing that I have learned, those of you who are on the call who are familiar and maybe following the news, some recent legal action, the MDA was sued by Smile Direct Club for antitrust issues. And the one thing I learned from that is you do not have to be guilty of doing anything, and people can still sue you. Now, needless to say, at the end of the day, they ended up dropping that suit and we were fine, but it's always better to be safe. So I'm going to stop here for just a second and stop sharing my screen to ask if anyone has any questions or comments that they want to bring up at this point in time. The Q&A is open, and you are welcome to use that for questions if you have any. I am not seeing that you do, so we are going to go back to sharing screen again. Perfect. Your committee director will be giving you a form to fill out. We ask that everybody do it every year. And the MDA policy is for you to reveal any volunteer or family member may have a personal or professional conflict with a fiduciary duty to the MDA. So what is that? That may be when you're using information gained for personal gain, using a position for personal gain or advantage to the detriment of the MDA, or using or disclosing any non-public, confidential, or proprietary information. That is when you would be not doing what you're supposed to do. So it's important that you reveal any potential conflict of interest. This will become very routine. If you're new to committees, you will be aware of it, and your committee director, Andrea, Bill, April, anybody that you work with on the staff side will be able to answer any question related to what you need to reveal. Key questions: do you have a known or perceived conflict? What are personal or professional interests? What is personal gain or advantage? Detriment to the MDA, using or disclosing information. These are the things you should think about when you are filling out your form, and you can certainly ask questions about, you know, whether something you have is a personal or professional interest. So let's talk a little bit here about good governance, and then I will come back again to the Q&A. I think we're doing pretty well in terms of time. Here before you are the MDA's core values. You can see 1 through 7. We are committed to ethical standards. We want to be proactive rather than reactive. We have a culture that's dedicated to openness and a commitment to transparency. We always remember that we're doing this for our members. That's the reason why we're here. Our trustees are a fiduciary, as all volunteers are, to the MDA. We think it's important to recognize diversity in viewpoints, and we need to verify that everything we do is in alignment with our policies and the strategic plan. Talking a little bit about good governance, there is definitely a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I will tell you that the equity part is something that we continue to learn more about. And I put this picture up here for everybody to see because one of the hardest things I think for any organization or any person to understand is the difference between equity and equality. A lot of people think of fairness as being treating everyone exactly the same. But you can see that if you treat everyone exactly the same, as in this picture on the left, you've got one tall person who has a great view of the soccer field, someone who has to stand on her tippy toes to see over the fence, and then you've got a person in a wheelchair that little podium that person is receiving is doing absolutely nothing for them. They are being treated equally, and yet the outcome is not equitable. They're not being given what they need to succeed. Whereas in the picture on the right, you can see the tall person can see, the middle person can see, and the person on the right who needed a little bit of a boost in terms of a ramp can also see. So that is kind of a pictorial definition of equity. And good governance definitely has diversity from the standpoint of various people's perspectives. You want to pay attention to what different people may need and want. We're not all the same. Equity, we endeavor to help every member succeed. And then inclusion, we want to make sure that everyone is comfortable within our organization. I had somebody tell me one time that The difference between diversity and inclusion is that with diversity, you are counting everyone, and with inclusion, everyone counts. So hopefully that would kind of resonate with you. Some barriers to good decisions, whether it's on a board, in a committee, or any other group decision-making process, are listed here. And these are kind of the rules of thumb or the heuristics that your brain uses to help you make decisions faster. And these are things that you use every day in your everyday life, but they can serve to being a barrier to good discussion and good decisions when you're making a decision in a group. So the first one is conventional wisdom, where everybody accepts something that everybody knows and doesn't question it. Conventional wisdom is very common. What you see is all there is. If you don't go looking for new information, then, or you don't have a new person join your group who brings you new information, there's a tendency to think that you have all the information there is to get, and that's rarely the case. Confirmation bias is the tendency to notice that which you agree with. I saw that in my own life when I gave birth to a redheaded baby. I had never in my life seen so many redheads as I did after that baby was born. All of a sudden, they'd always been there, but I didn't notice them. Groupthink is the fourth one. You know, when you have a really cohesive group and you really enjoy your conversations, it can become a desire to reinforce your relationships within the group, and you want to reach consensus quickly. So at that point, then you kind of turn off in your own mind anything that goes against what the rest of the group thinks. Time pressure can be a very common barrier to good decisions. You can be efficient and then maybe not effective. Micromanagement is where you want everything exactly your own way, and a good rule to overcome that is if you're 80% happy with a decision and everybody in the group is 80% happy with it, it's probably a good decision. And then finally, you may have seen this in other organizations, politics or cliques, you know, where if he's for it, I'm against it, or I know I always agree with so-and-so, so I'm just going to go along with what he thinks. So all of these are potential barriers to good decisions. I will share with you that I have not seen a lot of this at the Michigan Dental Association. Overall, I think our committees do a wonderful job and are very thoughtful in their discussions. But if you're aware of these kinds of things that can happen, it helps you guard against it. So let's take a brief break here from screen sharing. Again, I see a question in the Q&A. Oh, good question. Earlier this year, the MIWA, so Mark Johnson asked, earlier this year, the MIWA board gave members a discount in their monthly bill. Did the MDA Board of Trustees have to approve that discount? No, they did not have to approve that discount. And the reason why they did not have to approve that discount is because the MDA health plan is overseen by its own board of directors. So, for example, the MDA health plan has a separate board. The MDA Insurance and Financial Group has a separate board. The MDA Foundation has a separate board as well. And the PAC has a board of governors. So generally speaking, the different entities of the Michigan Dental Association function independently. And the only relationships are between the groups have to do with confirmation of their members, or in the case of IFG, the MDA Board of Trustees has to agree before a organization may be endorsed. So in this particular case, Dr. Johnston had asked that is not an example that would require approval. It was not a recommendation by a MDA committee, but instead an action by another board. So hopefully that will take care of that. Not seeing any additional questions, I will go back to screen sharing. We're now going to talk about the committee operating manual, and this is the point where we're really getting into more of the committee stuff. When it comes to how committees and boards are, what they have to abide by, obviously the most important thing is the law. We're not allowed to break the law. Law is numero uno. Bylaws are next, then any policy that has been adopted in the manual. Then in addition, any Board of Trustees actions. And finally, if 1 through 4 are silent on it, the governance hierarchy says that decisions about decisions will be made through reviewing parliamentary procedure. This is very unlikely to have an impact on you in the committees, but I just wanted you to know how this all works together. Relationships between the committee, MDA committees are advisory to the Board of Trustees, and you'll be receiving and discussing your scope of your particular committee usually in your first meeting of the year. So the composition of your committee, its purpose, what authority it has, and the charges for the year are laid out for you in your scope. I will say that authority has to do with what decisions are delegated to you by the Board of Trustees. Some committees are entirely advisory and bring all their recommendations directly to the board. Other committees have a certain authority that they can act within their scope and make decisions. So one example is peer review. The Board of Trustees does not oversee the decisions made by the peer review committee, except under very narrow circumstances that are outlined in the peer review manual. Similarly, the Committee on Continuing Education is authorized to prepare a slate of continuing education programs throughout the year within the existing budget, and they're trusted to simply do that. Similarly, the Committee on Annual Session fulfills its responsibility with minimal oversight by the Board of Trustees. So they also can bring, generally any committee can bring ideas forward within their scope for Board of Trustee consideration. And occasionally there will be times when committee members may be authorized to serve as an official representative of the Michigan Dental Association. In addition, you should know that your staff member who oversees the logistics and preparation of reports and minutes and things like that are there to support the work of your committee. And most staff have multiple responsibilities. So I say that as a warning so that you don't feel that they always have a lot to juggle. Committee board relations, I want you to know that committees submit reports to the board based on committee action. Your staff person will prepare those on your behalf and submit them for you based on your discussion that you have in your committees. I want you to know committee chairs or representatives of committees are always welcome to attend board meetings at any time. So that is open to you. And we do publish the schedule. Your committee may have a board liaison or may not. It really depends on whether you've asked to have a board liaison or whether there is, the board feels that there is a need for maybe more communication back and forth between your committee and the board. Let's imagine now you've made a recommendation to the board and you're bringing it forward. The board, as I had previously said, really takes committee recommendations very seriously. but that does not always mean that they will do exactly what you recommend. Once your recommendation is made, they can approve it exactly as you submitted it. They may revise it, like they like 90% of it, but they make a little change to it. They may refer it. So they may say, hey, this is a great thing, but I'd like to know what this other committee thinks about this. Can we refer this issue to that other committee as well? Or they may even refer it back to you with a question. They might also say, we want to take this up, but not at this meeting, so we're going to postpone discussion till another time. Or they may vote it down entirely. So, you know, your recommendation is taken very seriously, and I would say that probably the vast majority of times, whatever the committee has recommended is what the board decides to do, but it's not guaranteed. As I like to say, is the board is not there to do committee work, but they also bring more context to the discussion, so they may not do exactly what you are recommending. Hope that helps. From a financial standpoint, I want you to know that the budget is a calendar year budget. It's the same as our membership year. The budget starts in the spring and is finalized in September or October, usually in the early fall. Committee input into the MDA budget is definitely encouraged. And as we said earlier, the board is responsible for all financial management, especially and including the budget and the dues. So what departments bring forward or committees bring forward for consideration by the board may be approved exactly as it is put forward or revised. Now, let's imagine that your committee wants to do something that isn't in the budget. Does that mean you have to wait until the next calendar year or the next budget year before you could consider it? And the answer to that is no. If you see that there's a need for something that has a cost associated with it that really should be dealt with in a more timely manner, either because it's a great value to the membership or it will, really improve something that you're already doing, the committee can bring forward a recommendation for action, even if it has financial implications, for consideration by the Board of Trustees. And if it is even very time sensitive, the Executive Committee may be able to review and approve. They have budget authority to approve actions up to a certain dollar value. So we never want to have committees' initiatives be stifled by the time of the year that they are meeting and thinking of things. So leadership resources is my last area for discussion. I just want to bring this up to you guys so that you understand that we have a section of our website called Leadership Central. It's a great online resource for people who want more information about how to get involved. There's a number of different resources up there for developing leadership skills and also understanding how the MDA governance system works. It's a place where you can go to review past actions of the board and the House, or if you have a friend or a colleague that you think would be great to get involved, encourage them to go to Leadership Central and submit a volunteer interest forms. Our volunteer interest forms are a really easy little form to fill out, and you just say what you like to do or what you're interested in and how much time you have, and we can match them with a volunteer opportunity, whether it's serving on a committee or maybe just doing a one-time kind of volunteer service, all the way up to serving on the MDA Board of Trustees. Those are all options that are available for any member. Now let's talk specifically about your committee briefly. When your director goes over your committee scope with you, it'll talk about the composition of the committee. In general, committees are consistent in size and in composition. Consultants are approved on the basis of needed expertise or perspective. And the purpose of most committees is to assist the Board of Trustees. As I said, authority is usually advisory, but some committees do have delegated responsibilities. The duties are considered ongoing responsibilities, and the charges are what the board has asked your committee to do this year. Committees may have subcommittees. A committee chair can appoint subcommittees from within the committee if they need to. And in addition, committee members and approved consultants may serve as appointed. So if your committee, for example, would like to have a work group or a subcommittee to address a particular topic and you need a little outside expertise that is not currently on your committee, all that requires is the approval of the president, and they can be added. So your committee as a whole has to look at any recommendation that comes out of a subcommittee or a work group before it goes to the board, and then subcommittees expire at the end of the leadership year or when the work is complete. So if they do expire because the leadership year is over, it only takes action by the next year's committee chair to reappoint. And I've seen Committee on Governmental Insurance Affairs, we use subcommittees and work groups pretty extensively. I think the Access Committee does as well, and anyone may use it for any particular project that might need greater delving into, for example. So that is what I have for you. I see we have taken 43 minutes for the committee orientation. And at this point, I'd like to ask if anybody has any questions that they would like to put forward for themselves or for the good of the group. I know I covered a lot. Okay, well, I'm seeing that there are no questions coming forward, so I want to thank you so much for your time with us tonight. I really appreciate your taking the time out of your busy life to come. I hope that this gives you some grounding in MDA governance, the relationships between committees and the board, and a little bit of an insight into good decision making. And I appreciate your service on behalf of the Michigan Dental Association, and to your fellow members, thank you and good night.